The planet's losing so much wood, even Viagra can't help. Viagra, helping you keep it up through the climate crisis. The Supreme Court is set to hear arguments against and likely overturn Chevron's defense after 40 years of operation later this year. Chevron's defense was a Supreme Court precedent that basically, whenever there was a gap in legislation, allowed federal agencies like the EPA the power to be able to basically fill in the cracks and do things within reason in their purview. This is important because, as we'll see with the Amazon, when regulatory agencies don't have the power to actually do their job, bad things happen. We're taking a dive into the deepest, most impenetrable jungle of them all, the legal mess around the Chevron's defense. We live in an increasingly more urban world where touching grass is something that we need to remind people to do. We take nature for granted, and it's really easy to do. It reminds me of that old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one was around to hear it, did anyone literally give a shit? We literally already cut down over 5 million hectares of forest in the first quarter of 2024, from January to March. What difference is one more tree gonna make? To put that in perspective, in 2021, it was estimated that 500 million trees were cut down in the Brazilian Amazon forest, which equates to about 1.5 million trees per day and about 18 trees per second. I'm talking about deforestation, a problem so widespread it's making the planet balder than a middle-aged accountant. And like a planetary Rogaine, there are actually things that we can do to stop the ever-expanding presence of the Earth's forehead. I might have stumbled on some real doozies in the news recently.
And in South America tonight, an environmental problem of a much greater magnitude. The destruction
of the Amazon rainforest.
Aggressive increase in deforestation.
Now I know you might be thinking, well Keith, that's in South America. How does that affect me? Well, buckle up, my friend. Because, like that one night stand you thought wouldn't have any consequences, the deforestation in the Amazon is the gift that keeps on giving, not chlamydia, climate change. And trust me, no amount of penicillin is going to clear this one up. Over the course of the last 40 years, a full 1/3 of the Amazon has been either completely demolished or severely damaged. 17% of it has been really badly harmed, and the other 17% has been completely eradicated by a technique called slash and burn. This is important. And not just because it's giving the Lorax permanent ED. Let's face it, I'm no David Attenborough, but if sad climate scientists telling us how fucked we were worked, I wouldn't be making this video. Look, this problem is so big, I get it. It's easy to want to disengage and just get discouraged, but we can't give up hope. Look, apathy never did anyone any good, and it certainly doesn't inspire action. We need to find hope and cling to it wherever we can. And if we do, we may end up giving the Lorax the comeback story he deserves. Literally. Did you know that almost 350,000 miles squared of forest have been cleared from the Amazon since 1985? That's an area bigger than France, Belgium, and the UK combined. And it's not just about the trees, despite what my wood-centered rhetoric might tell you. Apparently, according to low-end estimates, the current extinction rate is somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than the natural extinction rate. We're killing more babies through deforestation than my youth pastor tried to convince me masturbation did. But we're not without allies in this fight. There's some really amazing organizations that are working to make sure that we're not losing as many trees as we otherwise could. Take the WWF, for example, the World Wildlife Fund. They have an early warning system in Borneo that's spotting deforestation faster than jealous significant other spots incriminating likes on Instagram. Or Greenpeace, who chain themselves to trees like a stage 5 clinger. Also, let's not forget about the native tribes, who are defending native lands with the fervor of a parent at a PTA meeting. Fun fact, did you know that deforestation is up to 11 times lower on indigenous managed lands than elsewhere? That's crazy. These people and organizations show us that standing up for the planet isn't just an expert's game, it's a human one. Just like in human relationships, it's not about being perfect, it's about showing up, flaws and all, ready to make a difference. The statistics paint a clear and honestly pretty alarming picture of the environmental crisis. Land grabbers emboldened by lax policy enforcement are stealing public land honestly really fast. Agriculture is the largest culprit, expanding largely at the expense of virgin Amazonian forests. Most of this expansion is happening largely due to soy and cattle production. It ends up being a double whammy because not only does it increase the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced through the production of more cattle and soy, but it also reduces the amount of greenhouse gases that are being taken out of the environment by the tree. And then there's logging, stripping the Amazon faster than me in a TikTok. It's estimated that 98% of the deforestation happening in the Amazon is happening without the approval of the right agency, which kind of just goes to show the rampant disregard for, and honestly lack of power of, these agencies that are supposed to be protecting the forest. Fire is also used extensively in the Amazon for deforestation. Normally it peaks during the Amazon's dry season, which is between July and November, but at this point, because of climate change, it's become a year-round phenomenon. And finally, there's urbanization, because as cities continue to expand, they expand at the expense of forested areas, cutting down millions of trees and displacing countless species. The Amazon Deforestation Monitoring Project reported a significant increase in deforestation rate from 2020 to 2021 at almost 22% increase. Staggering.
This whole situation was exacerbated under Brazil's new president, Jair Bolsonaro, a man whose environmental policy was about as supportive as Lenny Kravitz's leather pants. Which is to say, it seemed questionable even at first, but then when it's unveiled, turns out it splits wide open and there's nothing to stop you from hanging high and dry. Bolsonaro's strategy was simple. Cut funding to the environmental governance in Brazil so severely that their environmental enforcement ability was about as effective as a condom with a hole in it. August of 2019 saw the day of fire. In a coordinated effort in multiple places across the state of Pará, fires were intentionally set by cattle ranchers and farmers in a clear message just to show how seriously they actually took the environmental governance. And despite all of that, 2021 was still the lowest year for Brazil's environmental policy in literally the whole millennium. As 2021 ended, things looked like they might be about to change. There was a new competitor to Bolsonaro. Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, or commonly known as Lula, was running against him, campaigning on a platform of environmental restoration and pledged to rebuild and restore much of the Amazon that was lost. And politics weren't the only hope that the Amazon had. Organizations like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund, who've long been at the vanguard of environmental protection and action, were still doing everything they could through direct action, political campaigns, and just global awareness campaigns too. As the tides of public general will were changing, indigenous communities were seeing more success in what they were doing too, to protect the Amazon and the wildlife. I mean, they've literally been defending these areas for centuries, so they have a couple tricks up their sleeve for sure. As a matter of fact, one of the best ways to actually preserve natural land is to demarcate it legally as indigenous. And despite facing massive challenges and budget cuts, Brazil's environmental agencies were still doing their job and doing a good job of it. They are monitoring deforestation, enforcing laws, and watching protected areas. The Brazilian Institute for Renewable and Natural Resources, alongside the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, have been key players in this effort. Their work, ranging from satellite monitoring of deforestation to on-the-ground actions, is crucial for actually making sure that the Amazon stays protected. And increases in technology ever push forward what they're able to do, which is amazing. Now, Lula, he's far from perfect. His political career has had more ups and downs than Kanye off his meds. As a matter of fact, he actually got caught up in a political scandal in 2018 called Operation Car Wash, where he was actually indicted and imprisoned on charges of money laundering and corruption, which was a huge thing because it meant that he actually couldn't run in the presidential campaign in 2018 later that year. In March of 2021, the Supreme Federal Court actually annulled Lula's convictions, which let him run for office again. My God, the political battle that ensued was nothing short of a brawl. The people who were supporting him were saying that this was the sort of justice that he should have had from the beginning. His opposition was saying that this was just a sign of corruption. It was messy. In the end, Lula and his coalition ended up on top, which was great. But Bolsonaro, who was nicknamed the Trump of Brazil, was thought to not concede. And so after almost a week of nail-biting anticipation where everyone was holding their breath tighter than Spanx at an all-you-can-eat buffet, Bolsonaro finally conceded. It was a great show of support for environmental policy and really signaled a shift in Brazilian politics towards preserving the Amazon and nature. This highlights a fundamental truth about environmental preservation, which is that we can't choose our allies. Everyone has their own imperfections and peculiarities, and oftentimes progress and change is not straightforward. What matters most is commitment to the cause. We need to learn to meet people where they're at, not where we want them to be. You know, we can learn a lot from Brazil's story. As it turns out, there's been a staggering almost 50% decrease in deforestation in the first 9 months of 2023 alone. Turns out just voting and good old-fashioned regulation actually work. You know, voting is kind of like missionary. It's not super exciting, but it works and everyone can do it. Brazil also taught us the importance of protecting tribal lands. I mean, they were the first ones there, for Christ's sakes. They understand how these different ecosystems play together and the importance of protecting the natural life there. One of the most interesting things for me was actually the way that new technologies are playing into the whole reforestation effort. Take, for example, this little guy. This is the Erodium copy robot, and this is an ingenious little invention. You can load this guy up with a seed and then throw it across vast swaths of dead forest, and it can automatically and with like very low technology reseed large parts of the Amazon. In the right humidity conditions, this is the little swimmer that could. If it gets wet enough, the wood extends and contracts, pushing the seed deeper. Very effective. But prevention really is the best solution here. Kind of like trying to undo a circumcision. Some things, once lost, they're gone forever. It's estimated estimated that around $20 billion are going to be required to reforest just the Brazilian part of the Amazon, not to mention the human toll and the loss of species due to just plain old extinction. Right now, the Supreme Court is considering doing a similar thing to what Bolsonaro did, stripping the EPA and many agencies like it of most of their power. And it's planning on doing that by overturning a ruling called Chevron's defense. Established during the 1984 Supreme Court case, Chevron USA Inc. versus Natural Resource Defense Council. The Chevron's defense grants agencies like the EPA deference in interpreting ambiguous legislation. Basically, it says, y'all are the experts, we trust you, and as long as whatever you're saying is reasonable, go ahead and do it. It acknowledges basically that they're the experts, and it also understands the practical necessity of allowing these agencies to be able to do what it is that they're supposed to do in the first place, without needing to update everything legislatively. Imagine if every time the EPA wanted to protect an endangered species, or stop a company from, I don't know, dumping toxic pollutants into a river, it had to go to Congress and say, hey, can we say this? It's like asking your parents for permission every time you want to wipe your ass. It's super impractical, honestly really embarrassing, and shit is just messy. The Chevron case gave us a simple rule. If the law is vague, then the agency in charge gets to call the shots as long as they're reasonable. The importance of Chevron's defense and environmental regulation cannot be overstated. If this were to be overturned, then agencies like the EPA would need to go to Congress to literally sign off on everything that they're trying to do explicitly, which would massively hamper their ability to actually protect the environment and keep up with new scientific understandings, which kind of matters.
We can't let our protection of the environment get slowed down, because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that neglect only leads to regret. Case in point, Roe v. Wade. Congress left a hole big enough to drive a monster truck through. The Supreme Court parked a Big Mac truck right in that little garage. And now they're poised to do the same with environmental regulation. The Supreme Court has the power to interpret the laws that Congress passed. And that's what happened with Roe v. Wade. Congress had the ability to legislate it into place for 50 years, but they didn't, which left the door wide open for the Supreme Court to come in and interpret it however they saw fit. We can't let the courts decide this. This needs to be a law. Environmental exploitation without the proper regulatory agencies is as common as, I don't know, chlamydia outbreaks in nursing homes. Everyone who can is fucking doing it, and at that point, you're at a place where everyone's gonna die soon anyway, so. But here's the thing, this isn't a foregone conclusion. The Supreme Court is beholden to Congress, and Congress is beholden to the people. We can pressure our representatives to see the change that we want to see. We don't need to be perfect to stand up for our homes, but we do need to stand together. We can't let environmental protection become a flaccid attempt at stewardship. We need to get it up, keep it up, and show that when it comes to protecting the planet, we're hard as a rock.